Our job, and I see it as my purpose in life, is to just be a spotlight. I'm just trying to highlight the people that are creating really great content and give them the stage that they need to be noticed, because we've got it here. We're just not giving them the time of day. And I think Arkansas is finally starting to see the value in podcasts. We started the Artcast Awards, which is to celebrate all across the South, all the independent creators. And so it's community nominated, community voted, and then we go up there and we celebrate them. We give them their award, allow them to have their time. And so that was a huge night. It was so awesome.
All right, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Welcome to episode number 5 of the Voices of Arkansas. And I talked to a guy that we're just meeting now in person. I've been watching a lot of his episodes of his podcast, and I was telling him before he's probably one of the only people that compete with me in the suit game. So we'll probably throw some colorful suits that you've worn in the past. So, dude, Ty King, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. It's glad to be here.
So really what I wanted to kind of cover with you is, I mean, your background's in podcasting and you run a couple organizations locally here in Arkansas all around podcasting and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, I want to dive into like the business side of it, right? Like how businesses can you use podcasts and things like that. But before we do that, I love to always figure out like what were people doing before they got into like their now craft. So like bring us back as far as you want to go before you were doing podcasting stuff. Kind of what did life look like then?
Yeah, I was always, doing stuff with audio, like even from a kid. Like I remember we were just talking video before we started rolling here, but I remember like the big VHS tapes that you used to record on like camcorders and stuff. And so I used to love doing that. But then my grandparents gave me tapes of War of the Worlds and The Shadow and like all these radio plays. And it really made me fall in love with the form of audio storytelling. Mm-hmm. And so, I got addicted to those. And anyways, back in the early 2000s, back when Gateway computers used to come in cow boxes, if you remember that. I don't know if you're old enough, but anyways, it used to be like cow printed like boxes. They would show up at your door and we ordered your Gateway computer anyways. And so it was, early 2000s. Anyway, there were people that were putting audio, recordings of a show. They weren't called podcasts yet. And so we didn't really have a name for it yet, but people were just putting a show that they were putting together in audio form. They would put the MP3 file up on their website. You go there, you download it, you put it on your MP3 player or just play it from your PC. And so that's like where I started with those, sort of podcast form. I never recorded, but I was listening to everybody else's. But then started messing around with sound recorder on Windows 98.
Okay. Yeah, the Windows well, for me it was Windows Movie Maker, and so it was like a lot of those early software. So was there any like specific shows that you create, or like what was like your first show or like first thing that you talked about? I
was a crazy creative person, so like my stuff was like Stanley Kubrick but in audio version. Okay. Stuff that didn't necessarily make any sense, but there was a narrative in my mind. But no, just playing around with that and trying to get sound quality and the storytelling all the way done, and being able to put it all together in a Frankenstein type of way. Mm-hmm. But no, and then, I, through several things, I've got kind of a history in this town itself in Conway. I was here for a while, grew up in Jerusalem, Arkansas, between there and Tyler, Texas a lot. So like in the country, and like this was the city to me, and then moved here. Mm-hmm. And then after I was supposed to be going to college, but then I had like such, anxiety of like meeting other human beings. Like I never would have done this in my early 20s, meeting a complete stranger and talking and having a conversation with them. Like I was such a introvert, and that like talking to somebody new completely inhabilitated to me, where I couldn't even get out the door. And that's what happened on my first day of college. I couldn't get out the door.
Well, it's funny because like I think I'm kind of the same way in the sense of when I first started creating, it was literally I was like 12 years old, and obviously like when I was like 12, 13, 14, you're in those like teenage years, so you're like kind of automatically awkward. It's like a prerequisite of being a teenager. Yeah. And so I made like so many videos by myself, but there was always like that if I would ever go to events or something, there was always a little bit of anxiety. But I think just like I don't know how you kind of like got more extroverted, I guess. But for me, it was just like, as generic as it sounds, like just doing it more often. And like you now you're running festivals and stuff. So I'm sure that obviously helps in that in that side of it.
No, for sure. There's that. And so like it was a workup of like a daily having to work on myself. Okay, I'm going to go talk to another human being that I don't know, have a conversation and just listen.
Yeah.
And it kind of helped in being a podcast host itself because like our roles, and I always joke about this, but like the role as a podcast host is to be the dumbest person in the world. And because you know nothing, you're just constantly asking questions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what's that? Well, how did that happen? Well, tell me about. Oh wow. And then it's like you don't really have an opinion of your own.
Yeah.
You're just sort of asking ask questions.
I heard someone say it the other day. It was like they gave kind of two examples. They were like, you want to have like the 70-year-old what's the word, like curiosity. So it's like you're just like, oh, like tell me more. Or like also because I have a 5-year-old now, and like his biggest thing is like why.
Right.
Like, it's like you'll say something. It's like, well, why is that? Oh, it's because of this. But why? But why? It's just like really like diving like deeper into that. So on that note of just like being a podcast host, you've been how did you make the transition from like the the older school style of stuff, or like when did you like first jump into like podcasting as we know it now?
Well, I didn't have access to technology for quite a while. Like I said, I got a history in this town, and so like a few bad nights happened here, and I spent 12 years in prison.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, but in the meantime, I was constantly working on myself on the inside. And then I got connected with Walter Hussman, who owns the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and several of the newspapers down here in the South. And anyways, he sort of took me under his wing and, mentored me into entrepreneurship. And so, and sort of hearing from him and a few others that had come in and talked with me about what was going on with like the landscape, I guess, of business and how it had changed, because I missed this whole thing of social media besides MySpace.
What was how the 12 years, when was that? Like when did you get out, I guess?
In 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had already registered my business with the Secretary of State before I even got out. I just wanted the wheels to keep running as fast as possible. That way, when I touched down a pavement, I could just take off. And so I've kind of got that personality. Well, I will attach when I find something I don't know something about, I will attach myself to it and obsess over it until I become so good at it. Yeah. Yeah. And then move on to another thing, another. So that was like, I was like, well, I don't want to work construction the rest of my life. I've seen these guys that get out, and I kind of have higher, higher hopes for myself of what I want to do. You know what I mean? And so started a marketing business, and so I was doing just a little graphic design here and there, doing some, website design, that type of thing. Anyway, so started off with the Chamber of Commerce in Morrilton, Arkansas, if you know where that is.
So context too, I just moved here a year ago.
So maybe 30 minutes from here, but it's a little small town, like even smaller than Conway is. If you can imagine, it's like, it's a little small town. And then, so started with their Chamber of Commerce, super, if you didn't grow up there, you're not part of us, part of the thing. Yeah. So, and then moved up to Conway and joined the chamber here, and it was okay for a while, but then like I wasn't getting what I wanted out of it. And then it stepped up to Little Rock, and then in that Chamber of Commerce, I started like escalating through the ranks of, until the point where I was leading one of the leads groups and hosting events for them, and like doing the ribbon cuttings and like welcoming all the new members and all that stuff. But like no matter how far up I got in the chamber, there were still some C-level executives I just could not cast a shadow on their door. They wouldn't give me conversation because they just didn't know me. I'm a little weird. I've got tattoos on my neck. You know what I mean? I'm upfront about, having a past where I went to, I was incarcerated, you know what I mean? And that's something you can either Google me about, or I can just tell you up front and be honest about it, And so some people are a little thrown off by that. I've had very little, very little amount of people that have been like, "Oh, get away from me," because of that.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, thanks for letting me know."
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was like, well, I'm going to start a podcast and just see if it works. The station, the one that you pulled up, that's where that started from. I was like, I'm just going to start a podcast. They have no idea I have 0 listeners, but I'm just going to use it as a networking tool. I asked them if they'll be a guest on my podcast, and like it worked like a charm. Like I invited them. They were like, yeah, you want me on your podcast? Yeah. And like it was an honor. And then they're like, hey, I got invited to be a guest on a podcast. Yeah. And like they're telling their friends, and now I've been tapped into their network. But I'm getting this one-on-one conversation with them, and not only that, but it's also recorded. So now I get to go back and listen to what their answers were of all the things with this one-on-one conversation I was having with them. You know what I mean? Like, oh, what did they say about that? What was their advice? And then so I get to go back and hear exactly what it is again. And so it was great. It worked out great for me. And so that's what I really, sort of preach the gospel on, is like, if nothing else, use it as a networking tool. Because
I mean, in full transparency, that's kind of what the purpose of this show is. Like, I think, because I just, I moved here about a year ago, and like literally the only person that I knew in like the business world here was I'm a personal trainer at I don't know if you know Empire Fitness. So it's down the road. They've been around for a couple of years. But anyway, it's like he was like the one guy that I knew, and like I brought him, and I was like, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. Like I knew him, and then like as soon as we posted, I just started getting all these like DMs of like, hey, like this is my business. Like, can I be on the podcast? I'm like, sure. Like, we're meeting new people.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see kind of like, it sounds like the strategy was very similar. I do want to dive a little bit into that, but you did kind of touch on a couple of things. Like obviously like being in prison, like I'm sure you even mentioned like there's like I guess for lack of a better word, like adversity and like maybe finding positions or things like that. What would you say to someone that's like maybe going through something relatively similar in terms of adversity or things like that to help them, I guess, out of that, or maybe not even out of it, but more of like switching their mindset of like, if you just focus on the right things, like you can get out of it and get any opportunity you want.
Yeah. What helped me the most was gamifying everything that I was doing. And so by that, I mean, like, if you've ever played a video game, in your character, you always level up, right? You got XP and you spend that towards your character, and you get stronger, you get smarter, you up your charisma,
skill
and all this
points.
Stuff. Exactly, skill points. And so I had to think, okay, what does the level 10 of Ty look like? What does he know how to do? What languages does he know how to speak? What does he know about? What kind of type of people can he have conversations with? You know what I mean? Where has he gone? What experiences and what is he doing to contribute back to society? That type of thing. And so I made a huge list of all those different things, divided them up into categories, and be like, okay, well now here are the steps to get to that. Let's make some smaller goals to get to that large macro goal, right? And so working on that every single day and not losing sight of it. If you're like me, you get those dopamine hits of being like, okay, I won something today. You know what I mean? I walked my 2,000 steps I said I was going to do. You know what I mean? That type of thing. I worked out today. I ate good. You know what I mean? I learned a few more words in French, So those little wins, they really, really will motivate you to keep going towards those bigger wins. And so I would say, like, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want your legacy to be? I mean, you only get one chance, right? We don't get another chance after this. And so we could spend it becoming just neutral, which inevitably it's like a paper plane. When you put it up in the air, it's going to come down. You know what I mean? Unless you just keep it up in the air. And so you've got to put the work in order for that to happen. So
yeah, no, I love that. Like, no, I think the thing that reminds me of is there's this, I forgot what book it is, but they talk about this thing called like lead. Are you familiar with like lead and lag measures? Does that sound familiar? It's kind of like a niche thing. So basically what it is like, the reason a lot of people aren't able to hit their goals is because, or I'll explain lead versus lag first. So lag is like your end goal, right? So it's like, I want to make $10,000 a month. I want to, whatever, I hit, 10,000 listeners a month. And then the lead is all the inevitable things that you need to do that are going to help you hit that end goal. So like podcasts recorded, videos uploaded, things like that. And what the mistake a lot of people make is like they focus on the end goal way too much. They wake up and they're like, oh, I haven't hit this end goal yet. I haven't hit this end goal. But basically what you said is like, if you can gamify it and more focus on like, okay, I got up and I got the workout in, right? In the grand scheme, it's not like one workout isn't going to change the game. But when you do that one workout, when you don't want to do it 20 times throughout the month, that's what's going to ultimately like make that end goal inevitable. So basically what you were talking about. So one thing you touched on too, because one of my like initial things out of like podcasting into like what was called entrepreneurship was like starting a marketing company. Like I was running like Facebook ads, so maybe a little bit different than what you were doing. But what were some of those, I guess, things in early entrepreneurship that you learned that you still kind of have today? It could be strategies, like different skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of something that's not just in the weeds, just specifically for people like guys that do marketing. Because like for that way, it's like I learned that you need 3 revisions for your graphic design and no more, because they will continue to come back at you over and over and over and over and over. And websites too. And so I learned that a lot. But communication, I guess, is the biggest one. Stay communicative with anybody that is your client. I don't care what business you're running. Make sure that you are at least weekly staying in contact with your clients, or else they will feel like you don't care about them. And they will drop off, and somebody else is trying to, they're
trying to poach them,
chasing
basically.
the ambulance. Yeah, for sure. They're trying to pick up on your loss. Yeah.
For sure. So I guess what is the timeline there from? So you start the marketing agency and then so that goes into 2020, I think is when you said you had the station. What it was called?
So it had a couple of different iterations. Anyway, so it started off as Tyking Services, and then moved on from that into 2020. We started Arkansas Business Engine that was here in Conway. And then that sort of split up. I had 3 partners, and all the other 3 fell off. And so I rebranded as American Business Engine because a lot of the clients I was trying to get and we were picking up were from out of state, but like they were sort of turned off by the Arkansas part. And so I had to change it to American Business Engine. Even they don't care that we were located in Arkansas. It's just for some reason they don't like the name Arkansas being in the business for them to be their marketing company. I don't know why.
Interesting.
It's just a weird thing. Maybe it's location specific. I don't know. Or maybe
kind of pigeonholes it. I mean, and not the same thing, but when I was coming up with the name of the video content studio, I almost called it like the podcast content studio, but I also didn't want to like pigeonhole it to like just podcasts because like I don't just do podcasts, right? It's kind of everything. So maybe something along those lines is like they didn't want to pigeonhole it and it kind of look weird,
Sure. Yeah. Rebranded and then started back up in Little Rock, and then we've had our office there for what has it been, like 3 years now? Almost 4 years now. So we do a lot of work with a lot of nonprofit organizations now. A lot of them are in the recovery field. There's tons of recovery, like that's a whole different world. Like there's a recovery field across Arkansas. But continue doing podcasting, offering that to different clients. But then in 2020, I want to say 2, I was being honored by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for what they call the finest honoree. And it's a title that they give to somebody that's a young entrepreneur that also does a lot of volunteerism for nonprofits in the area. And so in return, I wanted to do some fundraising, and it turns out that it's hard to do fundraising. I had never done that before. And so I had like a few little coffee shop events and things that weren't really making a dent in the goal that I wanted to hit. And so I was like, well, what's an event that I can bring to Arkansas that has never been here before that I would still have fun at even if we don't make $1? And that's where I came up with Artcast, which was the first Arkansas Podcast Festival. Looked it up. Apparently, we've never even had an event, period, about podcasting here in Arkansas, which is so crazy to me because I've paid attention to what other states have done, you know what I mean? And I've been so tapped into that world for so long that like it's just like, oh yeah, well surely we've done something. Oh, nothing? Really? And so there's an event that used to happen in Austin, Texas every year called RTX. And it's from Rooster Teeth, if you know what that company is.
Yeah, exactly.
So Rooster Teeth used to have their big podcast festival, and it was like a big culture fest and everything. And so I was like, well, what if I make a small scale version of that for Arkansas? And so that's what we did. So for one night, we were at the Innovation Hub in North Little Rock, and we brought in people that were doing podcasting from all over the state. They were doing it in different areas. So like there was the Arkansas travel, and then there was like music, and then there was Cliff and Susan have their own podcast, and anyways, bringing a wide variety of people and even NPR personalities to come in and talk and panels. And then we had like 2 different workshops going. We had a lot going on, but that's my problem. I always have a lot going on.
And that was in 2022, right?
That was 2022. Yeah. And then we kept getting asked afterwards, how to start a podcast. And I was like, we were like, we couldn't make it, or I want more information. And so started digging more into it and about the industry itself and getting more tapped into places like Riverside and Podcast Movement, which is the largest podcast festival that happens in the U.S. Anyways, getting connected to those people that run those festivals, and decided to open up a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So we are the only one in the United States. There are some 501c6, which are like membership organizations, which are kind of like a chamber of commerce, but ours is the only nonprofit 501c3 in the country. And so what we do, it's called the Arkansas Podcast Collaborative. Again, with the name Arkansas in it, we'll probably have to change.
Didn't learn the first time around.
Right. Well, I was like, I was thinking borders, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then it just grew into something much larger than what I had already imagined. And so too quickly. So now we've got to reconsider our name.
Well, I think there's like that, to touch on that, because I think, some people might look at that as like, because you can, how would I put this? Is you almost, it doesn't really matter what you choose the name to be. It's just all about leverage. So like I've just been doing marketing for so long. It's like if you have Arkansas in the name, it's like you have massive leverage in the state.
Right.
And it's like, if you really break it down, because I think a lot of people have like this scarcity mindset where they're like, oh, I can only work with Arkansas. But it's like, you probably have millions of dollars a month, like in a state, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's more of like, how do you, like, what is the name? And like, how do you leverage that, you know? So anyway, sorry to cut you off.
No, you got it. And so, what we do is we offer free resources to people who are trying to start a podcast, specifically the ones that are trying to start a podcast to have a cause or meaning behind it.
Sure.
Whether it is, for example, we've been able to get grant money for several podcasts as well. Like one of them is for somebody that used to work for Wondery, or she does Disintel for Wondery. She wanted to make a podcast about why is it that there's only one facility in the world that studies women's menstrual cramps, and it's two guys who are doctors that are underfunded in like Wisconsin or somewhere, just like in the middle of nowhere. And so, but so many women go to the ER every year because of complications with menstruals. And so the podcast is about the trouble that she had, and why is it that what can we do if we had more funding for that area? So it sort of starts there, but then goes into what have we been told? What else have we been told that is just part of our anatomy that we just have to deal with as part of life because we're not putting the funding behind fixing some of these problems or issues and being able to have better solutions for them. Anyways, so we were able to grant or give her $75,000 from an organization in New York. What the role we fill is that we are a nonprofit fiscal partner. So that means a lot of these organizations, there are hundreds of thousands of organizations that are out there. Each one of them has grant programs, and they're all different sizes and availability and like when you apply for them. But the majority of them want to have a nonprofit fiscal partner in between, because it's like our reputation is on the line, our status with the IRS is on the line, rather than just handing over $75,000 to the podcaster that they don't know and be like, here, good luck. I hope you make something good. You know what I mean? I hope we hear from you again.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And we've seen, grants all the way up from, $300,000. And so like, it's a lot of money just to hand over to somebody. So they want us to be in between to sort of be responsible. And naturally any nonprofit could fulfill this role, but we're the only one that is, our main purpose is podcasting. So it kind of makes sense for people to go with us. And then, we use operations grants and donations to help ourselves operate as well. And so, anyways. So trying to do a little bit more, positive impact with the world by raising these conversations that are happening. Or our latest episode, we talked to somebody who's talking about the 8th and H case in DC and getting them off. I don't know if you listened to that episode, but like,
I listened to like the first part of it, and then I just got into the case part. But tell me more
getting
about it.
them. Yeah. So there were several men that were accused of a crime, back in, a long time ago, and they spent over 20 years in prison on a life sentence. And then they were eventually proven innocent. And, so after 20 something years has passed by, now they're out of prison, but now seeking to, get them pardoned. And so anyways, these podcasts literally, they change the conversations that we have, which changes the way that we interpret culture itself. But they can also get laws changed. And so I do a lot of that with, whether it's with those types of podcasters or, I contribute to several other podcasts like Smart Justice with Restore Hope. And so talking to Supreme Court justices here and what are they going to do about the juvenile justice program for 2025, and so it's amazing, like the change that happens around just having a conversation. But these are recorded conversations that anyone can listen to and pick up on anytime you want to. If you were that awkward person like I was, where I didn't want to go have a conversation with somebody, I can just turn on a podcast now and listen to what those people were talking about.
Yeah, and it's like it's so much easier to do too. It's like, if we look at, we were talking about Anchor transitioning to the Spotify podcasters. It's like before you had to have like, well, I think it was more like the perception of quote unquote needing to have like better equipment, but it's just gotten so easy to be like, you can literally pull up the app on your phone and like record it. And like the audio quality is like not bad, and like, talking about the change thing, I think, you've probably heard, well, I think maybe it's Wondery, maybe it's not. Crime Junkie, what are their, I think they're their own thing now, but it's like, that's a good example of, being able to make change of like, they talk about like cold cases and not even just them. Like there's a lot, like I'm pretty big into like true crime stuff.
Okay.
And it's like, there's people that like literally change the trajectory of these cases, like kind of like you said, just by having a conversation about it. The other thing that comes to mind is I don't know if did you see what's his face Dana White on the acceptance speech for Trump, where he was like giving shout outs to like all these podcasters, like, you know, Joe Rogan and stuff, and like literally like we're in a world where like podcasters are changing election result. They're not changing the results, but you know what I mean. It's like
they're
giving a big impact.
There's a reason why both sides, I don't care who you voted for, but like either side, both of them, their campaigns had podcasts in the campaign trajectory of what they wanted to do. I mean, that's a part. It wasn't just 60 Minutes. It's not just, you know, television or cable interviews or whatever with the traditional type of media. They know the difference that it makes to go on podcasts now, and that's been shown. I mean, it had a huge impact on the voters this year. So like, there's no slowing down, and you know, both sides. You know, from what I hear, I keep up with politics and everything. So both sides are planning on continuously being on more and more and more podcasts these next few years, because they reach way more people that aren't. I mean, like the CNN and the traditional media, like they've dropped so much viewership. You know what I mean? And so like,
and it's also like a relationship standpoint too. It's like people feel so much closer to, you know, someone that they've watched for a long period of time. You know, let's say they've watched, you know, we'll just use Joe Rogan as an example. They've watched him for, you know, years, and then he like has someone influential on. It's like now he just has way more influence than like the random 60 Minutes episode that like no one even knows who that person is, and they switch around a lot. It's like there's no real like personality there, kind of.
And the type of conversations they have, they're natural. Like you watch the guests, they may be the big names and everything, but they're sitting just like I mean, we're just sitting here, you know, having a conversation
versus a teleprompter that's like
so you get the real person. Yeah, exactly right. You don't get a prompted, you know, scripted interview. You're getting somebody's real, authentic, off the top of their head type of answers, and so you get to really know who they are.
Yeah. One thing that's really cool, you know, just based on what you're talking about, is like you're giving grants to these podcasters that, you know, they have like a mission behind what they're doing. So if we kind of dug into that a little bit, what would be, because you also talk about like the free resources that you have for podcasters, what's maybe like the first like couple steps that you usually tell, like, talk to me like I'm a brand new podcaster. I'm like, I have a mission. I want to start a podcast. Like, what are like the first couple steps that someone should take?
To start a podcast?
To start a podcast.
Oh my gosh. So I tell people there's 4 phases of your podcast. There's planning, there's recording, there's editing, there's post and repeat. And so
the repeat part's the most important.
That's going to look, but it's also going to look different for everybody, because like there are, you know, increasingly more and more. Every time I go to Podcast Movement and you walk through like the alleys of all the different vendors, there are new ones showing up all the time. Everybody's got an AI integrated platform where you can host your podcast.
It's going to be worse next year too.
Oh my gosh. It's like, it's constantly, there's more and more and more. And by the time you go to the next one, just a few months later, like those other ones have dropped off, and then you got 5 more that popped up in its place. And so it's pretty crazy. But no, the planning is the most important. I tell people all the time that you can get away with bad audio, bad video, but you can't get away with bad content. And so like, if you're nervous on camera, it's going to come through. It's fine though. But like, make sure that you're giving something of value. People are spending their time sitting here, like maybe somebody's sitting here watching this right now. I hope that
we were saying has gotten to this
exactly. Well, yeah. I hope that we're giving you something that you feel like it's worth staying for more. You know what I mean? Rather than just wasting your time. There's nothing more valuable than your time, and there's nothing more valuable for their time to consume your content. So just putting out a conversation, be like, "Well, hey, how are you? How are you?" Well, that's awesome. Well, we went shopping the other day, and it's like, "All right, guys, that was the show." And it's like, "What did I just watch? Why?" I get that. There's an audience for that, but like, make sure that you're giving something of value to the people, whether it's you're making them laugh, making them feel like they have somebody else in the world that's going through something that they've also gone through, or you're educating them on something they want to know, or you're improving their life in some way. Somehow you're giving them something they can walk away with and say, I got blank from listening to that podcast, you know?
Yeah.
That's the most important part.
One piece that you talked about, and maybe there isn't like a perfect answer to this, but you said you don't want to like show up nervous or be nervous. Do you have any like recommendations of like how someone could like not be nervous other than like reps?
Oh my God. Practice over and over and over and over and over. Don't let the first episode that you record be the first time that you stepped in front of a camera. Record lots of times before you do that first real episode. It'll help so much. Oh my God. Repetition. It will help you so much. I've seen people like plan and plan and plan, and like their outline for their podcast is just like impeccable. Mm-hmm. Like they've got everything planned out. Like there's no room for error whatsoever. They're like, I'm ready. I've been practicing in front of the mirror. And then they sit down and they watch that lens of the camera, look at them like it's an eyeball. And then like you see like all of their life decisions like flash before their eyes, and they just freeze like a deer in the headlights. And it's like, yeah, you should practice ahead of time. Yeah. Don't assume that you're going to have it just because you got it down on paper. Yeah.
So the planning, and then next is recording, you said? So it's planning, recording, editing, posting. So some tips on the second part.
What are you recording? Because like, what is the format of your podcast? Is it just two people that are sitting here like we're doing? Like if it's this form, which is the most common form, I would say is most right now, right? So if it's just us, you've got 3 cameras that are pointed at us. You got one at the host, you got one at the guest, you've got one that covers both of us for a wide shot, right? And so being able to figure out a sort of format that brings all those feeds in. If you're going to use one wide shot and that's it, if you want to start there, fine. Or if you're going to do it online with like a Riverside or whatever, and you're going to have your recordings, I would say find whatever is going to be a good, repeatable way for you to produce content. And usually the way you produce your first episode is not how you're going to go forward.
Yeah.
You always change it up. Always when you're like, well, I could actually do this a little bit better. And then this and this. I would say the most important thing is to, please capture it on video. Don't just try being an audio only podcast, because it has been shown over and over and over and over and over that we are getting favored by being a video podcast over audio podcasting. Audio podcasting is going to be like a specialty type of art, pretty soon. To where YouTube, will monetize your content if you have enough subscribers, right? And enough viewership. You can use sort of like using the buffalo, like the Native Americans use the buffalo, right? So you use every part of it. So if you're recording in video now, not only do you have the audio versions that you can put on Apple and, iHeart and all the rest of the apps, but also you have it that you can put it on YouTube and YouTube Music, but you can also use it for Spotify, which also allows video. But then also use those clips, because the number one way that people will find your podcast is through shorts, reels, and clips. And so use those for YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And like your listenership, your viewership will increasingly go up. I go to schools to talk to kids about podcasts a lot too.
Nice.
And at high schools. And these STEM classes, I'll go in there and I'll be like, okay, they asked me to come and talk to them about podcasting and show them how to use their content and their equipment. And so, but usually the first question I ask them is like, okay, how many of you guys listen to podcasts? And like, a few hands go up, like maybe 2 or 3 out of a group of 30 kids. And I'm like, okay, well, how many of you have seen a clip of a podcast on TikTok? Oh, every single one of them.
Of course.
And so that's how they consume their podcast. They're not listening to the full version. They're just getting those little hits. And so those little value hits that are in your podcast, being able to clip those out and use them on TikTok and YouTube, that's how you're going to get your audience. I mean, I know it's sad that our attention span is that long, but at the same time, you only have a limited amount, and there is a flood of content that is out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back to your point, it's like when someone's choosing to consume a piece of content, the way that I think about it is like humans are selfish. So they're always like asking themselves, like, what am I going to get out of consuming this content? So it's like, if someone's looking at, if they're scrolling on YouTube and they see this thumbnail and it's like hour-long, conversation versus it's like, the only way you can sell them is by title, thumbnail, and are they going to click on the video, right? Versus with like a short form piece of content is we'll pull some of the best pieces from this, and it'll be on purpose, some of the best parts of it, so that people are like, oh, like this is what I'll get out of that piece of content. Now I need to watch like the full thing, with the assumption that there's probably like multiple other good, snippets from that in general. But I believe the same thing. I think, there's some podcasters I talk to, they're like audio only, like till I die. And it's like, well, good luck in terms of like distribution. There's
diehards that will die on that hill, and it's like their show will die on that hill.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Yeah. It's insane. But no, like I've seen it over and over and over. And like one of the examples I recently posted on my stuff was, showing people the difference that it makes whenever you post on YouTube rather than just strictly audio. We had a podcast that we recorded the video, but like we really focused on the audio at first, and we were getting like 75 listens per episode. Right. And this is across all the platforms. Yeah. And so it wasn't really getting the numbers we wanted to hit. 75 really not going to pay the bills. It's not going to get us monetized. It's not going to be able to get us to have a subscription up or anything for that we can even run a Patreon on.
Sure.
But then we started uploading to YouTube, and then we started using clips. And like the first few clips, we've had clips that go over 1 million. And so, but even out of those 1 million people that listen to the clips, like you can see in the analytics, like how many people subscribe to your content because of that. And it's a small fraction of those people that are, but like those numbers, those continuous numbers that are coming to listen to your clips or they get recommended, like the more this is something else about podcasting. Every single platform for podcasting is another social media platform. It has an algorithm, and it has certain things that it will favor you for and things that it will discount you for. And so Spotify is the worst about that. I mean, they're the best and the worst. That's because if you're putting a video podcast on Spotify, they will favor your podcast. But it has to fulfill a lot of different things for them. So every podcast platform that you pull up, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, every one of them has a beginning homepage. That's a For You page, basically, just like it is when you start up on YouTube. It shows you videos or podcasts that it thinks that you'll like based on the things that you have liked or listened to before. How it recommends your podcast to somebody else that might like your content is if the content that you're putting out there is relative to those people, right? And so if your descriptions, if you're talking about those subject matter in your podcast, period, your transcripts, if your thumbnail matches, and there's a lot of different things that it looks at. So you're having to appease the algorithm in order to get recommended to more people rather than just putting it out there in the ether and hoping somebody finds your content. You know what I mean? You got to constantly feed that machine.
Yeah, there's so many, because that kind of jumps ahead into the kind of like the posting side. But I think that's like a really common misconception with like social media, and what I've seen even with businesses or really anyone that wants to, post is like they just assume like, oh, these guys are like, they post consistently, like it should be pretty simple. And then like they just like upload it with like, they don't change the title, they don't add anything in the description, like the things that are going to like ultimately drive people to your show. So there's obviously more that goes into it. So if we take a step back to like the editing portion, how do you recommend people to edit their podcasts?
Yeah. So it's really going to depend on your budget and also your tech and know-how. And like, do you have somebody that can help you that does have know-how? If you don't, or YouTube University, I get right. University, there's do it yourself. And so, yeah, I know lots of people want a podcast, and I hear it all the time. I've got an idea. I just don't know how to put it all together. And then I just explain to them. They're like, I can barely operate my email. I don't know how to do all that. And so there are some simple ways of putting together your podcast. Okay, so starting out, if you don't have the cameras like you have a really nice setup here, by the way. And so if you don't have the cash for that, or you don't understand how to put all this stuff together to make all the cables and all the data feeds on it, you can start with your phone. Your phone, if you know how to operate your camera on there, just start recording there. You can also take that and you can edit with different free platforms. There's Riverside. There's a lot of people use. We're trying to think of
Voice Notes.
So Voice Notes is another one that people record. Yeah, they're like the audio.
Yeah.
With, but
I think I know what you're saying. I can't think of the name. But like there is, to your point, there's a ton of like those sort of, especially now, like that's the thing is like there's so many companies that are trying to make it easier for you to, like, that's their whole selling proposition is like, if they can make it easier for you to record a podcast or whatever. So like just anyone that's watching this, just like Google it or YouTube, like record podcast for phone. You'll probably get 50 results that come up.
Yeah, for sure. And usually the top ones are running ads or they have a free version of it. And so there's Riverside, StreamYard, that type of thing. And so like you can record your guests from there, and they make it easy for you to edit. I mean, it's basically looks like a film strip. You just cut out the parts you don't want, slap it together, put it out there to your podcast host. Make sure you have a host that's set up that fits your needs. If you're not starting off with the amount of cash that you can pay for like an Acast or those types of podcast hosting companies, Spotify for Creators is a free platform to host your podcast, and plus you get the analytics from Spotify, which is great. But yeah, I don't want to get too in the weeds on like the analytics.
So that's like the posting stuff, and the one that I use. What is it called? It's called Red Circle. Have you heard of that? Yeah. So Red Circle, the only reason I think I've used Spotify for podcasts, or I guess Spotify for creators now. I've used Red Circle. I've used, what is the other one? There's one more well-known that's like a little bit less intuitive, but the only reason I use Red Circle is because it has the, and maybe the other ones use it, they have dynamic insertion. Have you seen that? So basically what it means is like I can retroactively, you could probably do this with the other ones too, but there's a section in there where, let's say I have like a promotion coming up, I can like record an ad, and then I just click like one button and it adds it to all the episodes, which is like pretty, from a marketing standpoint. Obviously, we won't go too down that rabbit hole, but
so that's the whole thing is like when people start asking about that, I'm like, I've been in for so long where there's like intrinsic knowledge where it's like I just assume that you know these things that I know, but also I'm trying to like it's a struggle to be like go back down to basics because there's so many options. For us, what we record in, usually when I'm in the studio or when I'm taking the podcast on the road and going to record somewhere else, I'll use our Blackmagic 4K Pocket Cinemas. I'll use those to record. I will use the audio. I usually use either these Rode mics, like the pod mics like this, or the Shure SM7Bs, and record to a Zoom PodTrack P4. And so then I go back and I take the audio from that SD card, and I'll take the video from my cameras, and then I'll put them in Adobe Premiere Pro. I'll line up all my shots, sync the audio, and then I start editing with my 3 shots. You know what I mean?
Do you use what's it called? The AI editor?
I don't trust it.
I'll have to show you.
I've tried it, and okay, yeah. There's some mistakes. But yeah, I've tried it before, and I'm like, I don't like the way they cut this.
Yeah, I used it. I was literally about a year ago. I tried it. I forgot the name of it, but it's a Premiere Pro extension.
Yeah.
And I used it a year ago, and it didn't do that well. I've been using it for the last couple episodes, and it's like I can edit this podcast. We'll edit in 30 seconds.
That's awesome.
And go back and forth, wide shot. Like you can pick like when it. We're getting really nerdy here, so like we'll cut it, but we'll obviously talk about it after. So I guess the what I did want to kind of go back to. So we talked about the 4 steps. Artcast. So I guess when is the next one? What is Artcast all about? Just like kind of like an overview of the festival.
So Artcast, now in its 3rd year. Now it's 4th year. Sorry, we just had our 3rd annual podcast festival. So like that first year, it was one night only at Innovation Hub. The 2nd year, I was basically doing like when you open your pool for the season, right? You have to put shock in there, like a heavy amount of chlorine that just kills all the bacteria in there and like gets it started. That's kind of how I saw the 2nd year. So where we had a full week of workshops all across the state at different locations, sometimes twice a day at 2 different locations. And so like we broke our necks trying to put as much information out there and many opportunities out there for people to learn about podcasting, and then all led up to our main night in Little Rock. But then we also spread out to Northwest Arkansas, and that's where we really saw a huge, influx of people, and like the interest really is that community is completely different than
Bentonville and like Fayetteville.
Yeah, so last year we hosted one workshop in Fayetteville at the Fayetteville Public Library, and like the room was packed. We brought in PRX, if you know who they are. They're the ones that put out like TED Talks and all that stuff. And so they came in, they did a workshop with us. That was great. The next night we were at Bentonville at the Mid-Year Guitar Gallery, and like we packed the house there too. Dave Jackson, if you know. Okay, so the School of Podcasting, he's been around forever.
Oh, okay, man.
So yeah, he was there.
Why do you think that is up in the, like? Why do you think it's bigger up there than down here?
They really foster a community of creators and creativity, and like the town square of Fayetteville has 3 podcast studios.
Oh, nice. I know Brian Fenton is name. Go Rogue. I want to have him to come down here, but I'll probably have
Brian's great. He worked with him a lot too. Yeah, he's spoken for us. And then so that was last year.
I keep forgetting. We're recording this on the 2nd, so it's kind of confusing. Yeah, brief. Okay, it's 2024.
That was 2023. So 2024, we did the Little Rock event here, and like it was pretty sparsely like. I don't know what the deal is. There's been a change. There's been a change in something with like the way that people are attending events around here. I still haven't come to grasp like what that is yet, like what motivates people to get out of the house and go to these events now.
But then we had our one in Fayetteville Public Library for 3 days, and that was our main event where we brought in all the podcasters from across the country. We brought in Kate from Wondery. We brought in, podcasters from, Colorado and Texas and Seattle, and so we had them all involved with, the event. And so we had the very first Artcast Awards this year. So I'm a member of the Podcast Academy. If you know, like the Academy Awards for film, right? Mm-hmm. So podcasting also has an academy.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we have an award show called the Ambies, and that happens every year. But every time I've gone to the Ambies, I've realized that the people who are being celebrated are the ones that have the huge producers behind them.
Of course.
They've got, so they've got NPR, they've got iHeart behind them, they've got Wondery, they've got, like you said, the Crime Junkies and all that stuff. Like, it's the ones that have the big teams, a lot of production put behind the show. But so there's one category for independent creators, but the majority of people that are making these podcasts are independent creators across America, especially here in this area. Like, we don't have those huge names yet in podcasting. I hope to get there.
Sure.
And so, we started the Artcast Awards, which is to celebrate all across the South, all the independent creators. And so it's community nominated, community voted. And then we go up there and we celebrate them. We give them their award, allow them to have their time. And so that was a huge night. It was so awesome.
Yeah.
One of them, it's so diverse and so crazy. So we've had, there was a man who does a Celtic music podcast who came up in his kilt. There was...
Okay. Well, actually, I think I saw that clip, or it was Alyssa or something.
He was so cool. Yeah. And there were these small kids from an elementary school that do, instead of having school announcements over the intercom, they do a podcast. And I'm telling you, the adults can learn from the way that they put their podcast together. They are so good at it. But yeah, so we started off with that. And then we had 2 full days of workshops and stages of speakers and panels. And NPR came out and talked about, the future of NPR and creating shows, because a lot of the NPR stations are integrating both podcast and on-air shows. And so they will allow for people to come in, record podcasts in their studio, and then they will put an option out to air their episodes as an ongoing show for their NPR stations, as well as being able to put the podcast out there for anyone to listen to. So it's kind of... Yeah, and so things are just sort of a melting pot of creativity now. And so, we were talking about that area. I think one of the things that makes the Northwest different is that they've got, like I said, all the different options for creativity. There are lots of different organizations. Like here, we have the Arkansas Cinema Society, but I know that they have a branch there. But we have of course us, so Arkansas Podcast Collaborative, and the majority of us are here in Little Rock area. But besides that, we don't have a whole lot of other arts organizations, but there are a ton of them up in the Northwest. Plus, you've got the heads of 3 different corporations. You've got Tyson, you've got JB Hunt, and you've got Walmart. And so all 3 of them have made a call out to anybody that was working in remote situations across the United States. If you want to continue to work for us, you're going to have to move to our location in the headquarters. And so now, like Rogers and Springdale and Fayetteville, the population is so different now because you're bringing in people that have lived in, from Ohio to Hawaii, wherever they are in the United States. They're having to move in and find a home, buy that up. And so, of course, it has a lot of different effects on the housing markets and, of course, the infrastructure and all that stuff. But also it brings in a lot of people that are used to consuming a lot of different types of content and creating in different ways. And so that's how we get also people like yourself and Joe Klein. And
I was literally just going to say, because it's a crazy story. I won't go too deep into it, but when I first moved here, I had been following him for a while. I think at the time he was actually living down in Dallas. And it just so happened that when I moved here, he had just also moved back. So I plan to have him on here too. Just not awesome. He's killing it in Fort Smith. So it's hard to get him out here.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, he was a speaker at the event, your event.
He was a speaker at Artcast. We were on his pod too, Arkansas Minds, and so we went to his. Just since then, that was just a few months ago, and we went into his studio that he had just created, and it was nice and everything. But since then, he's got this huge building he's renovated, and he's doing all the content for Fort Smith.
Yeah,
on his one wheel, we're not riding around.
He has one wheel in his cinema. What is it? It's so cool. I forgot the gimbal they use, but that gets down into the nerdy part too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I guess last couple things, like what, obviously that's Artcast, the festival. So I guess any big plans for the one in 2025? Do you have like a date yet? I know probably towards the end.
So we're looking at November, and we're looking, constantly we're going, how can we get this bigger? How can we get this bigger? Arkansas, the first couple of years, we were trying to figure out what is our relationship to podcasting. Historically, I've told this a billion times if you've ever seen me on anything else, but like historically, Arkansas has waited 100 years after a medium is created before it dipped its foot into the water and tried its hand at it.
Yes. A long time.
Yes. That goes,
Good. It is.
That goes for television, radio, newspapers, magazines. You look at it historically, there are decades that pass before Arkansas actually starts creating their own. They'll let everybody else around us start creating in that field, and then they'll be like, maybe we should get it.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's no reason not to do podcasting here. There are a lot of people who are already putting a lot of great content out there. Like, our job, and I see it as my purpose in life, is to just be a spotlight. I'm just trying to highlight the people that are creating really great content, and give them the stage that they need.
Sure.
To be noticed, because we've got it here. We're just not giving them the time of day. And I think Arkansas is finally starting to see the value in podcasts. The way I measured that is that we have way more podcasts now this past year, that have been sponsored by businesses and not just trying to be put out by businesses. They see the value of, rather than us just sitting here talking about insurance, why don't I just sponsor another podcast that already has an audience?
Of course.
It may not be about insurance, but we know that those people that listen to the podcast need insurance. And so we will be top of mind because we're supporting the creators they like to listen to. And so lots of banks are sponsoring podcasts now. This last year, we were finally able to get some of the bigger names in the podcasting industry to sponsor us. And so we've had Riverside, Mopod, and Dystopia, like some of the podcast hosting companies and stuff, and Sounds Profitable, and they send us a video. And so, like, it's amazing that we're getting more tied into that whole realm. And rather than being like, on Arkansas thing, knock it off the table. It's been like, you guys are actually something legit, and you're doing something really great. And they see the value of what we're putting out there and how we're trying to promote people here, and my overall vision. So this year, okay,
yeah.
So this year we're gonna start there. This year, of course, we want to go bigger and bigger and bigger all the time, but also keep it manageable and provide the most value as possible.
Sure.
And so we're actually working, thank God, with a company that does nothing but event planning and helping. Oh my, yes. This past one, I had the headset on around my neck, my phone in my pocket, of course. I'm having to communicate with the AV team while I'm also hosting on stage. I'm be like, okay, the next speaker is this one. No, those are the slides I told you that was going to be on. No.
Go music.
Yeah. Play the music now. They're coming on. Okay, they're like, I'm having to do that, and so like I'm jumping back and forth, and then back to the green room to go get the next speaker to make sure they're ready. And so, thank God we'll have lots of help this time around, which gives us more time to fill up those seats and give more time towards getting the people meant to be there. It provide most value as we possibly can. So, getting more of the industry players to come in and be speakers, be more industry players to be sponsors of the podcast, get more companies to see the value of sponsoring podcasts, or even like studios like yours working with people like you. What is the value of, we were talking about, well, you can use this if you're just getting started. Yeah. But if you're going to start a podcast for your business, you kind of want to be seen as professional. And so why not go to the professionals that are already have the equipment and could coach you on this? Mm-hmm. You know the content. You run a business all about this one thing. If you know about insurance and that's your thing, I don't know about insurance. I know about that. But I can sure record you and coach you on how to do a podcast, and you can do the same. Like if they want to come in here and record something with you, you have the spot for it. You've got all the equipment. You can put it together for them. Great. Fantastic. That's a perfect win-win situation.
Yeah.
I want to convince more companies of why that's valuable. Why it's valuable of their time and money, and what is it they're looking at. You're always looking at your ROI, right? Mm-hmm. Try it. We don't have enough case studies to even show you what the ROI is in Arkansas. We can show you anywhere else in the United States, but we can't show you Arkansas because we don't have enough people that are coming in and creating content for you to actually have an ROI number to look at yet.
Sure.
So come in, try it. I mean, we're both swearing by it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It makes sense. Anyways, Besides that, my overall goal is to help try to bring legislation to Arkansas to be the Georgia for podcasting. If you know, like Georgia, if you've ever seen a movie in the last 20, 30 years, you can see that at the very end of the credits, there's always a Made in Georgia peach symbol, right? And so that's because a lot of these Hollywood films don't film in California, or they will film some stage stuff in California, but the majority of the films that they're filming are in actual Georgia, because Georgia is so versatile. They can change it, to look like anything. You can build sets and all that stuff. But Georgia made a law to where you will get a huge tax cut from filming in Georgia, because not only you're not going to bring everybody that you need, right? You're going to bring your essential crew. You're going to bring, your actors, your directors, your producers, script managers. Everybody's going to come there. But you're going to hire a lot of local people to do a lot of the other jobs, to build your sets, to be key grips, to be the people that are serving the catering, to do the traveling back and forth of the actors and the directors, any kind of logistics that they need. I mean, like, everything else is being hired from within. So you're literally creating jobs inside of Georgia to do that. Podcasting has an opportunity. Arkansas has an opportunity to do that right here. Where if, let's say, iHeart or one of those, Wondery or somebody like that wants to produce a podcast, because it's inevitable that they're going to move over to video as well, because the audio form is kind of a niche thing now. They're going to need that. So for studios like yours to be here, to be like, okay, we're going to Arkansas because we get a tax cut from filming our next season of whatever the show is here. And then we can transform, you can transform this background to be absolutely anything. Yeah. You can change these chairs out to be whatever. You can have it. And so being able to be, fit out and give jobs to people that are here in the state, but also give the tax cut to the people, it brings a whole different industry to us. We get to be a hub for a growing industry that is increasingly becoming more and more and more important. It's like I said, not everything from presidential campaigns all the way down to how do I let people know about my business, or how do I raise awareness for this cause? I mean, it just makes sense. It's just convincing the right people of, seeing the value of what that is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, any last things you would say about, well, actually, no, last thing. You guys are going to be doing a content creator kind of like meetup here towards the end of, or what date? The 25th, I think, or remind me of the dates, the content creator meetup thing.
Oh, you put me on the spot there. It's stumpty. My calendar is always so full of different things. So I'm doing on the 9th, I'm doing a workshop on grants with PodOps, which is a podcast hosting company in California. That's going to be online. And then, I believe it is on the 25th. It's not actually our event, so we're just participating in it. And so it's kind of incredible to see these two ladies who have found sort of internet fame off of doing TikTok videos and everything like that. And so they've decided they wanted to put a creators event together to try to bring people that do all different types of creative events and content. So we're cornering, of course, podcasts. We'll have a podcast booth where people can come in, try their hand at it, record with us. We'll put a special episode together based on that. But also I'll talk to people about, how they can get grants or how they can get their podcast started there as well.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess in general, how can people, we'll put everything in the description stuff, but for specific places that they can find about Artcast, about these events, things like that, best place.
Everything can be found on arkansaspodcasters.org. Just go to our website. We have links to absolutely everything there. There's free resources. There's a calendar of events. There's, the benefits of being a member of the Arkansas Podcast Collaborative, everything. So
sweet. Amazing. Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on. I mean, obviously, we could probably go multiple hours on tech and the specifics and stuff. So maybe what we'll do is we'll probably have you back on for like an advanced podcast, or editing, uploading, that type of thing. So thanks so much for listening and watching. Of course, down below in the description, also show notes on the podcast app. We'll have all the relevant links, and also we'll have the dates of these events down there as well. So you guys can, if you're watching this before it, obviously come to it. If not, they'll have the obviously the bigger festival here towards the end of the year, and I'm sure other mini events like leading up to that to really make it exciting. So again, last but not least, last time, down in the description and the show notes. This has been episode number 5 of the Voices of Arkansas. If you have any questions, let us know. Leave a like if you liked the episode. Comment what you thought. We'll see you guys in the next one. Talk soon.
Peace.